it is time for our next speaker. She's indeed a bit of a celebrity now. She's been referenced in the last 3 or 4 talks. So please join me in welcoming Sandra Laursen to our session.
It's very fun to get referenced in talks. All right, I want to talk today, we've been talking, the last few talks have been talking about students and teachers. And of course, that's where the action is with inquiry-based learning. That's where you live and breathe and do your good work and your creative work. I love that we had some students here to talk too. I want to go up to 30,000 feet and sort of talk about the movement. And I'm going to be talking today about the IBL as a social movement, a reform movement in education. And I want to talk about some issues that we've been discovering in research on this community and the movement. We have been funded by NSF to do a study on what we call the IBL ecosystem. It's the interacting parts, right? The people, the ideas, the structures meaning the organizations, the activities, the workshops, the conferences, and so on. How are those, all those different kinds of entities important for the past development, the current growth, and the future sustainability of IBL as a reform movement? We've done interviews. We call them the community history interviews. They're kind of a mix of oral history and sort of sociological kinds of interviews. We've got a bunch of historical documents from EAF and other places. We've had a social network questionnaire that many of you completed, and we're busy working on the analyses of these data in a sort of mixed methods way. We've got analyses coming out, or that will be coming out. I think a lot of these things will be in the coming year. A history of IBL as a learning community. We've got a piece that Zach Haberler has written on the landscape of definitions of IBL. Our social network analysis is looking at how people join this group and engage with it, how they leave, where they come in, where they go. We're looking at the IBL centers as case studies of department-based reform. And today I want to talk about some work on sort of the discourse in this community, the messaging, and how the messaging of this movement, this community, relates to the spread of inquiry learning. And I want to say up front that some of this is going to be a little tough to hear because there's some messages here that haven't been productive for everyone. And so I just want to acknowledge that you may have emotions about this. Some of this may connect to your identity and how you feel about this movement. And I just want to put that on the table up front. I have emotions about it. All right, so setting the scene, we know that undergraduate instruction in mathematics continues to be dominated by lecture despite calls for reform. IBL as an educational movement, we're calling it, you can certainly go back deeper into its history, but we're calling the movement as starting in about 1998 with the first Legacy of R.L. Moore conference, which gathered former Moore students and UT Austin instructors primarily. And what we want to sort of frame it with is that it took a while for this to become an active movement, but that the innovation of IBL teaching has started to diffuse or spread more rapidly and gain some traction in the last decade or so. And this is a picture, a snapshot of a map of where people came from to that first Legacy conference. And you can see, you know, I'd like to know who it was from Indiana. That's where I'm going. But it was not a widespread thing yet. The growth of the movement can also be traced in the activities that have gone on, starting with the conference here, which had tens of people. Perhaps 10 years later, we're getting to the place where there's a variety of kinds of activities, presence at more meetings, hundreds of people engaged. And now, today, we can list a long list of activities and structures and people and connections, and the numbers in the thousands, right? And I should add to this list, you know, we now have research. We had a bunch of talks just in the last couple hours about with data about IBL. That wasn't true back in the day. And so this is what we look like. We did a survey last year of sort of the IBL community, and it's a survey, so not all of you answered it, but you know, just to show that the thing has gone coast to coast at this point, and I apologize to those from Hawaii and Alaska and Canada and Germany who are not represented. But you know, the point is, it's spreading. It's catching. All right. The analytical framework I'm going to use to talk about this sort of comes from two places. One is Rogers' classic work on the diffusion of innovations. And what Rogers looked at, he looked at agricultural innovations, and he looked at why did farmers take up or not take up particular innovations, such as no-till farming or certain fertilizers or pesticides. And he was looking at the innovation itself, right? The relative advantage that innovation had over alternative methods or products, its compatibility with the needs and values of people who might adopt it, its complexity or incomprehensibility. How easily could people understand what this thing was and how to do it? How adaptable was it to different settings, right? Could the farmers in Iowa, in eastern Iowa, use it just as well as the ones in western Iowa or in Georgia or in California? And observability. This is how easy was it to try it out and see how you liked it, right? Could you go visit your neighbor and see it in action and decide for yourself? So that's looking at the innovation itself. And then the other thing we've looked at is the social movement literature, which is looking at how do we send the message of a movement, a social movement. And a word I'm going to use a lot here is this idea of framing. How do the members of the movement present their work to each other and to the outside, right? How do they talk about what they do within their circles and to outside folks that they might be trying to persuade to join them? And I want to point out framing is a cultural process. It changes over time. The messages change. There may be different frames within a movement. You might use a different frame inside your movement than outside, or different parts of the movement might use different frames. It's changing as the people change, as the situation and context of the movement change, and so on. All right, our research methods for the piece of the work I'm talking about today, largely interview-based. We interviewed a lot of people in the IBL broader community. Part of that was based on the folks we already knew from having worked with you for a number of years, and then what we call snowball sampling, where we ask people that we interview, who else should we talk to? We also had, as I said, a bunch of documents, particularly from the EAF. They've been very gracious in sharing materials from their history and archives. They save everything. It's great for historical work. And our data analysis is transcribing the interviews and carefully coding them. The analysis today, I'll be talking about sort of references to the Moore method, to IBL, and sort of these features of the innovation that have shaped how the movement spreads. All right, so our starting point in the early days was the idea of the Moore method. And just many of you know about this already, but Moore's teaching used no textbooks. Students did not have outside information. That was easier back then. There was no internet. They couldn't collaborate with each other. They worked individually. And he presented them with a sequence set of proofs. They worked their way through. When you came to class, you were expected to have solved that problem. If you hadn't, you left class so that you wouldn't see the answer that someone else got, right? You were to solve this on your own. So it was very individually based and rigorous in that way of keeping people really accountable for each piece. And Moore began often in the stories that are told that by asking the student he thought was least likely to have the solution to go to the board and write the proof, right? So it's starting with someone he doesn't believe is capable or is least likely to be capable. So how have we adapted? How has the framing adapted over the 2 decades since the point I label as the beginning of the movement? First, we have the terminology modified Moore method. This label was generally used, or is generally used, by those who had some connection to Moore as a student, an undergraduate or graduate, or maybe to a connection to someone who was a student of Moore, but modified from Moore's method. A lot of people say in our interviews, nobody could do Moore's method but Moore, right? So my method is by definition modified because it's distinctive. The terminology IBL has come into use over time, and that's more generally used by people who don't have that personal connection to Moore. There are more significant adaptations to the method compared to the original way Moore taught, and there's more commonly expressed what we might call a big tent philosophy, saying that this is a general method, it's an approach, a strategy, it's not a prescription, right? There's not a method, it's a family of methods that have in common certain principles. So that's one framing shift, framing adaptation that's happened over time, and that we uncovered in our interviews. Another one is towards sort of what IBL means. In particular, a negotiation toward student peer-to-peer collaboration. As I mentioned, Moore did not let people collaborate, and today many of us do in our teaching. And I want to point out that the way we see this in the interview data, the successful Moore students remembered how empowered they were by this individual solving, right? And there are stories, you can pick those up at the EAF booth often, right, about the guy who spent his Christmas vacation working on all the problems, right? And so it's very empowering to have done it yourself, to know you did it yourself. And so that's one reason they spoke about the importance of not collaborating, right? Younger instructors, and I say younger in a sort of, not necessarily chronological age, but people who've come into this more recently, often told us how they felt the culture of a more method class, which did not have collaboration, was incompatible with their own experiences and their own values or views. So this is a quotation from one of those instructors. I think there probably was some competitiveness in a more method class, but that's not something I really want to emphasize in my class. I want to emphasize collaboration and teamwork. So this is a person expressing a value that they don't see to be compatible with a traditional Moore style. So a shift to encompassing collaboration. Another shift in framing, another adaptation of the frame that has come about, and we see in our data, is a movement towards thinking of inquiry as a move towards general education. And so one person says, it wouldn't work for the students I work with. I think they would find it intimidating or pointless. And they get the example of someone who's studying, heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. They have to take my math course. Why should they be taking it? So seeing this is adaptable to those students, and that's not coming from that's a broadening of the frame over time. So one thing we can learn from this is that these associations had consequences for the diffusion, right, for the spread of IBL. The name itself has been a constraint on the spread of the movement because it doesn't describe, right? The Moore method could be a way of brushing your teeth or tying your shoes. It doesn't tell you it's about teaching, right? And also it communicates to some that this is a closed group. You got to know more to get it, right? And if you don't know that tradition, you can't do it right. And so that therefore hinders adopters from assessing the compatibility of this pedagogy with their own setting, right? And this is somebody who's speaking to this issue of it means different things in different contexts, and this naming doesn't express that. Okay, another framing shift that's happened over time that we see in the data are a movement away from the ideal of the charismatic genius as the one who's the instructor, right? And we all know Moore was a brilliant person and a brilliant educator. People are questioning in our data, do I have to be a rock star? Do I have to be like that, right? And so they're saying, are there other models for me to be an instructor? And a realization, again, that instructors have to find their own style that works for their own personalities and values. So here's someone noting that shift. As a group, we have become more supportive of broad interpretations of inquiry-based learning. That's been a uniting force in general because it's allowed people to be different and still be invited to participate, right? So making more space at the table for different ways of doing IBL. All right, so this is where also people brought up this issue in a way in which this has been a hindrance to the spread of IBL, which is Moore's problematic social views, right? And these are well known, they're documented in history. I'm not telling you something you don't know or you can't look up, but there are racist, sexist, anti-Semitic comments on record and behaviors, people excluded from the classroom. And again, this was widely known. And this was one thing that was a surprise to me in the data, is how widely known this was, that this was a problem. People told us, part of the legacy is racist. There are people who would be on board with our ideas, but because his name is still associated with it, sort of on principle, they wouldn't consider it. And we heard this kind of story kind of more often than I expected, right? I know someone who won't come to these meetings, right? And so this is where we see active loss of people from the community who might want to be there. All right, so the point here is that if we think about this as a movement, we have to be deliberate about the messages we're giving, right? And this name had been an asset at the beginning when people came together to gather Moore's former students, right? But it's not showing up as an asset now because it doesn't help people comprehend the innovation, right? That's one of Rogers' criteria. In turn, flexibility has helped the movement grow because people can see the adaptability of it to their own settings. And the historical connections to the social legacy communicate a lack of inclusion, which is not compatible with all members of the community's values anymore. All right, why am I telling you this? Well, there's a couple reasons. I've thought a lot about this. how to share this finding with you. And one thing I want to say is, as a researcher, it's my ethics, right? I need to be transparent. I've gathered these data from you, from this community, and I need to share it back to you so you can use it and so that future people know. I also think of it as an ethic of care, right? That I can't just dump this finding on you and say, hey, here's your problem now, figure out what to do. I need to engage with you, right? And so one of the ways our group has chosen to engage with you on these findings is we've written a short paper. We have an academic paper that's in review. Academic papers in education can take forever, so we wanted to write a short paper that you could have now. And we've also gathered responses from some community members. So the idea is, we're trying to help you understand this finding, think about what you want to do with it, and we've gathered some ideas from some of you in the room, and others who aren't in the room, just to get you started in thinking how might you respond. We didn't feel it was our job to tell you what to do with this, but we wanted to give you some ideas. The other thing I want to say is, why am I telling you this now? I think you're ready, right? This is a strong movement. It's a healthy movement. It's exciting. You're all here. There's been 5 sessions of IBL talks this week. You're ready to take this forward, so you're big enough to handle it. All right, so my last words are, sort of to dial it down, the symbols do matter. Our interview data show that the symbolism connected to more matters. So do actions, right? Just changing the symbol doesn't fix the problem. You can't change the past, but you can change the future, right? As has been already brought up nicely in the last talk, we don't get a free pass just because we teach with IBL. It's not automatically more equitable. It can be. We got to do it right. We have to do it right in our classrooms, and we have to do it right as a group. I'm telling you this too as a research finding, right? So it's not just something to whisper about in the corner or to say, did you ever hear that story? We can't unknow it now. So what do we do with the knowledge, right? And that's part of the conversation. I hope that these findings help you start. I do want to refer you to this link where we've got the papers posted. And I want to thank especially Zach, who was the chief analyst on this stuff, brought us a lot of really nice insights about social movements and education history. To Chuck Hayward, to Brian Katz, Chris Rasmussen, Mike Starboard, Nina White, and Vilma Mesa, who are the community members who have written those pieces, and to many wise people who have been helping us think about this, as well as to the Sigma for making a space for this conversation. Thanks.